Hello and welcome to the developer edition of Release Readiness Live. My name is Mohit and I'm a developer advocate here at Salesforce. I'm also going to be the MC for this session. I've joined by amazing group of product managers and experts and developer advocates who will walk us through some of the exciting updates that are happening in Spring 23 and also answer your questions. During the session, we'll make some forward-looking announcements. Remember to make your purchasing decisions based on the features that are currently generally available. That's all from me for now. Now let me hand over to Leo.
Thanks, Mohit. Hi, I am Leo Balter. I am a Senior Product Manager for the Lightning Web Components Framework, and I'd like to present some new exciting features. Let's start with a few productivity improvements. From Spring 23, you can now debug wired properties and methods easily using custom formatters in Chrome Debugger. Previously, you had to rewrite properties to a wired function and inspect the deconstructed data and error properties. Let me quickly show you how to use this new feature. First, make sure to turn on the debug mode on your Lightning Web Components. Next, you will need to enable custom formatter in Chrome Dev Console. Let's inspect a LWC component from the LWC Recipes app. This component uses a wired property. Click on the rendered custom element. Click the See Apex Wire Method to Property element in the Elements panel of Chrome DevTools. Switch to the Console tab and type $0. We can now view all the details of the configuration and the data that was returned by the wire adapter. Spring 23 now provides an additional method to query for DOM elements within your LWC components at runtime. Why do we need this when you can use the standard query selector that you are already familiar with? Let's understand this better with some example code. Before this release, you selected elements within your components using the query selector methods. It's okay to use it, but you always needed to use a string parameter matching their IDs or class. If you are using LightDOM, this might lead to picking other elements that are not immediately from your component DOM. Let's see how to use the LWC refs to set references for the elements within your LWC. Simply set a LWC attribute to the elements that you may just want to reference, and they are going to be available in your component class. Let's move on to other improvements we have added to the LWC templates. Introducing improved conditional directives. What you see on your left is how we used to conditionally render pieces of our LWC templates. You had to repeat them for adding more conditions. This was performance heavy as it used to call the getters frequently. With the new and improved conditional directives, LWC if, shown on the right, is much more simplified and the getters execute only once, leading to better performance. The next feature I want to highlight is something our community has been asking for a while, a refresh API that will let you synchronize component data without page refresh. Think of this API very similar compared to the Force Refresh View, with one difference that this API is built with modern standards and can support both LWC and Aura. Note that this feature is in beta and we welcome any feedback from you. In order to implement first, you will need to import the lightning/refresh module. Dispatch a refresh event to signal content refresh without reload. Lightning Web Security, LWS, is a new client-side security architecture replacing Lightning Locker for Lightning Web Components. This architecture has a lot of advantages, including better performance and is secure as Locker. This release, we have added LWS for Aura components too. LWS for Aura is in beta, and you will use the session setting, use Lightning Web Security for Lightning Web Components GA and Aura Components beta to disable LWS. We recommend you to test your existing LWC and Aura components manually in Sandbox before enabling this feature in production. Note, if your org does not have any custom components, we automatically enable this setting for you. We have some miscellaneous updates worth noting. We have improved render time for the LWC components. Also, we have made SLGS icons more accessible and compliant with standards. Finally, UTEM, our open source UI test automation model, has additional tools and linting support. Do not forget to check the details in the release notes on how to install. And that's it for me. Now hand over to Andre for more.
Thanks, Leo. Hi, I'm Andre Sayer here on the product side of builds and languages for Heroku and Salesforce Functions. I'm happy to share some of these enhancements that we made, which will make your life easier as a developer on the Salesforce platform. So to recap, what is Salesforce Functions? Salesforce Functions is a service built on top of Heroku that lets you deliver scalable experiences by extending the data and developer workflows which you already have and know and love. With the power of elastic compute and open language flexibility, Functions makes it easy for you to use the languages, open source libraries, and tools of your choice. And just like all Salesforce solutions, you don't have to manage any of the underlying infrastructure or technologies yourself. So what's new for Spring 23? While we're constantly making improvements to Salesforce Functions, we want to highlight some of the new Functions improvements that we're bringing in this release. The one I'm most excited about is support for Python and access to its extensive open source libraries and community. First off, let's take a look at what is most exciting about having Python support within the Salesforce trust boundary. Python is one of the most popular programming languages, with nearly half of all developers having some level of experience with it. Python also has a vast ecosystem of open source libraries accessible through pip and PyPI, the Python package index. It has nearly 500,000 open source libraries which you can leverage. Many of these open source libraries are used in the fields of data science and machine learning. Python is the de facto language in both of these domains. And lastly, Python has a certain simplicity to it, which makes it easy to learn and understand, whether or not you're a seasoned developer or somebody who is just getting started. Let's take a deeper look at Python support for functions. You can generate a new Python function using the Salesforce CLI by specifying Python as the language during function creation. This will create a base project underneath the functions folder. Let's take a look at what was created. Here, you can see a function that queries accounts using SQL. As a best practice, it is recommended to use a virtual environment when working with Python. So before running the function, let's create and activate one. One of the main benefits of using Python is being able to rely on its largest package index, PyPI. So before starting our function, let's install our project dependencies with pip. Make sure you are authenticated into a Salesforce org before starting the function. To start the function locally, you can run sf run function start, and then in another terminal, you can invoke it by running sf run function, providing the URL and payload. Now, let's see a real use case using Python. Here, we've implemented a function to apply watermark to an existing image in our Salesforce org. To do this, we will rely on an open source image manipulation library in Python called Pillow. Our function requires a document ID as the input. We will retrieve that document using SQL, and then we will use the Pillow library to perform the image manipulation, adding the watermark at the bottom left corner. And then we will re-upload this image back into our Salesforce org. This here is the watermark we will apply to our document. Let's activate the Python virtual environment, install the dependencies, and start the function. In another terminal, let's invoke the function passing the document ID in the payload. As you can see, our function was successful. Now let's refresh our document, and you can see that the watermark has been applied. How cool and easy is that? We also have a number of other notable enhancements in Salesforce Functions in Spring 23. First of which I want to highlight is binary field support, where we have made it easier to work with binary and base64 data within the SDK. This is the type of data that's inside certain documents stored in your Salesforce records. We also have made it easier to use the Salesforce Bulk API in our SDKs. The Bulk API lets you work with thousands of records at a time, and we have provided this in an idiomatic fashion where CSVs are not required. It looks and feels very native to the language which you are in. We are also providing additional regions in this release. So this lets you process your data all around the globe and makes it easier to meet your security and regulatory requirements. In addition, it provides you with much better latency depending on where you're trying to access your data from. These additional regions include additional spots in the US, in Ireland, Germany, Japan, and Australia, and there are a whole host more to come. We are also providing additional support for custom cloud-native build packs, where we further extend Salesforce Functions. This is an open source project which allows you to further extend Salesforce Functions. You can access the CNV ecosystem, so you can do things such as install Puppeteer and its Chromium dependencies for use within your Salesforce function. Now I'll turn it over to Julian to show you how you can learn functions using our Functions Recipe sample app.
Thank you, Andre. Hello. My name is Julian Duque. I'm a principal developer advocate here at Salesforce, working mainly with the Elastic Services team, specializing in Node.js and JavaScript. And today, I will show you the best way to learn about Salesforce Functions. Meet the Functions Recipes sample app. Function Recipes comprises multiple examples teaching how to use the main features of functions and a handy Salesforce application to navigate the source code and interact with implementation examples using Lightning Web Components and flows. And best of all, it is an open source project. Let's take a look at the Function Recipe sample app in action. From the Salesforce application, you can take a look at the different code examples through a friendly interface. You can select the programming language and navigate through the different files associated with the recipe. For example, the main function or the tests. You can also execute the deployed function from the interface, providing the input parameters if they are needed, and getting the JSON response. And remember that this project is open source. You can click on View Source and you will be taken to the GitHub repository in the exact folder where that recipe is located. You can also see some implementation examples using Lightning Web Components and Flow. In these examples, we are relying on a function that processes a large JSON data file with geolocated information. We are getting the locations closest to a provided point with latitude and longitude. And then, the closest locations to that point are being rendered on a Lightning map. To get the source code, you can go to our GitHub Trailhead Apps organization. There, you will find the Function Recipe sample app. You can clone it in your computer and run the samples functions locally using the Salesforce CLI. We recommend to use the Salesforce extensions for Visual Studio Code to develop functions. You can find all the code examples under the Functions project, including the new recipes showing you how to access Heroku data from functions. To run a function locally, navigate to that function folder and then execute sf run function start. This will detect the language of your function and will start it in your local computer. Now you will be able to invoke it from the Salesforce CLI. If you want to see how to invoke the function from Apex, navigate to the Apex classes folder and check the generic function invoker or the other classes that are available within the project. To learn more about the Function Recipe sample app, go to its Quick Start project in Trailhead and earn that badge. And that's it for today from me. Now I will hand it over to Andrea for updates on external services and APIs.
Thanks, Julian. Hi, everyone. My name is Andrea Guzman. I'm a product manager in our platform services area, and I'm here to talk to you about some important changes coming in our integration space. Let's start by talking about external services.
Back in 2018, we made external services generally available on the Salesforce platform. Since then, we've made significant improvements to the product. But before highlighting some important enhancements coming to external services in spring 23, let's just talk about what external services is. External services is an integration product that allows developers and admins to build automation across multiple systems by declaratively connecting external REST APIs. We use open API specifications to accelerate the creation of actions that invoke functionality in other systems from within Salesforce, providing a useful tool to help you automate workflows and build process integrations. For example, suppose you're interested in using a REST-based API like Twilio or GitHub, or maybe an API you created yourself using MuleSoft Anypoint Platform. And along with that, you also have access to an open API specification that describes the API. You're then going to declaratively register the web service in external services, which is going to do the heavy lifting by importing the API specs operations and automatically create the underlying code and methods that are exposed to users as invocable actions. Finally, these invocable actions can then be used across the Salesforce platform, from being consumed by automation capabilities such as Flow Builder and bots, and most recently Omni Studio, to being programmed natively into custom Apex code. Here is a brief overview of the various improvements we've made to the product over the last few releases. This spring, we're shipping the biggest platform limit increases to the product ever. We have increased a number of limits, as shown in the slide, including providing support for larger specifications and service registrations. This means you can now register up to 150 registrations and register a specification of up to 10 megabytes in size. And to make it easier to track these limits, we've enhanced our setup UI, which I'll highlight as we get into in the demo. Additionally, we now automatically validate the API schema during service registration and have also added additional options to make it easier to register your service. Finally, an update for all Muleys and developers building APIs using MuleSoft. We've now made it even easier to connect MuleSoft to Salesforce with fewer clicks. There's a new MuleSoft services page in setup to log into the MuleSoft Anypoint platform and import REST APIs from Anypoint Exchange as external services. So be sure to check that out if you use MuleSoft for your integration needs. Now, let's see how some of these enhancements come together in a demo. Today, I'm going to register MailChimp's web API as an external service in Salesforce. So first, I head over to the MailChimp GitHub repository to download the spec for their marketing APIs. This API is described with an OpenAPI 2 specification and almost 9.4 megabytes in size. If we take a closer look at the API, we can see that it features over 200 operations. Previously, if I wanted to set any of these operations as invocable actions through external services, I would have first need to modify the spec to work around the prior considerations and constraints. For this demo, we are interested in accessing the getPing endpoint, which helps provide a simple health check of the MailChimp service before building our integration. Now, let's head over to my Salesforce org. Before we register the API, we first need to create a name credential. For this example, I've already set up both the required name credential and external credential for MailChimp in setup. Notice we're using the next generation of name credentials, which offers a series of new capabilities, including the ability to use custom headers, which allows you to define arbitrary name value pairs, such as API keys, that are passed along with the HTTP callout as headers. Now I will navigate to the updated external services experience. Notice the new visual gauges at the top of the page that show the current usage and maximum values for each per org limit. Let's click New External Service. Then I'll select from API specification as the API source. I provide a name for the registration and description. Then I'll select one of the 4 registration options that are now available. In this case, I'll select Upload from Local. Then I'll choose the respective name credential I previously created. Now let's upload the MailChimp marketing spec. Keep in mind that if I wanted to register this 9.4 megabyte spec through external services in the past, I would have had to shrink it down and make some modifications to work around the previous 4 megabyte size limit. I hit done to initiate the registration process and auto validation of the schema. Once done, you'll see the schema displayed, and the new validation functionality is showcasing a few warnings, but since they're not related to the operation we're going to use, it's not really critical to address now. So we're just going to go ahead and hit Save and Next. External Services is now processing the entire spec to model out the metadata and actions. I'm interested in the getPing operation, so I'm going to choose that operation from this wizard experience. Now that the registration is complete, we can consume these invocable actions via Salesforce Flows, Apex, bots, or even Omni Studio. For this example, I'm going to head to Flow Builder and create a simple flow that invokes the getPing operation from the MailChimp API. With this new experience and flow, I can simply search for the get ping action, and I can even see the description of the action I just registered in external services. I'll go ahead and give the action a label, an API name, and a brief description. Keep in mind that name credentials takes care of the authentication in the callout. So we're just going to save this flow and try things out in debug. And sweet, looks like everything's chimpy. This gives me confidence that I can continue to import additional operations from the MailChimp API and access these as invocable actions from across the Salesforce platform to further build out my process. So that's a brief example of some of the recent enhancements made to streamline the external services integration workflow. Please review the release notes for more details, along with any of these additional resources, and continue to connect with us on the Trailblazer community. Next, let's talk about some API updates. A small update we've added in this release is the ability to manage delegated administration by the tooling API. This means you can now find new tooling objects like delegated group admin, and delegated group grant, which can be queried and updated to manage delegated administration.
So that's all I've got. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Alba for your next update.
Thank you, Andrea, and hello, everyone. I am Alba Rivas. I am a developer advocate here at Salesforce, and I'm going to share with you all the innovations that the Spring 23 release brings to developer tooling. If you didn't heard about it, know that DevOps Center is generally available since December last year. These are great news, as DevOps Center simplifies the way of moving changes between environments, detecting modified metadata automatically, and recording all the operations in a GitHub repo behind the scenes. That means making collaboration between release managers, admins, and developers stronger and easier. New capabilities have been added for the GA release. Check the Salesforce release notes to know more. Next, let's continue talking about the Salesforce CLI. If you take a look at the Salesforce CLI release notes, you will see that they are divided in two sections: innovations for SF and for SFDX. The SF CLI was created to unify the CLIs from different Salesforce products and clouds without disrupting the regular SFDX one. Let's take a look at the innovations that were published for both CLIs on the timeframe of the Spring 23 release. Now you can write SFDX commands in any order and also using spaces instead of columns, a much more developer-friendly experience. More metadata types are supported in both CLIs, and a couple new commands are available. For instance, the new doctor command allows you to run CLI diagnostic tests, and the new which command to find out which plugin a command is in. The way in which you write plugins has also improvements. Check the Salesforce CLI wiki to know more. Finally, my favorite feature is the new string replacement functionality. Let's take a look at it in a demo. With the new replacement feature, you can now automatically replace snippets of your metadata source files with specific values right before you deploy them. This string replacement is ephemeral because the changes aren't written to your project, just to the deployed files. For instance, let's say that we have this name credential file that is pointing to an app deployed in Heroku. We want to deploy two different name credentials, each one of them pointing to our production and to our UAT app endpoints, respectively. The string to replace will be Heroku instance enclosed in braces. To implement that, we can define two replacement patterns. The first one will read this file name, but you can also specify a collection of files with a pattern. Then it will find the string to replace, which could also be a regular expression. And finally, it will replace the string with the contents of the production instance environment variable. This will happen only if a deploy destination environment variable exists and its value is production. But conditions are completely optional. The second replacement will insert in the placeholder the UAT instance, and that will happen if the deploy destination environment variable is UAT. Now let's test the replacements. We define the production instance and the UAT instance environment variables first. Then we execute the deploy command, setting the deploy destination environment variable to production right before the command. Here I am on Mac OS, but you can set environment variables in any of the ways your OS supports. Also, note that the replacement feature works for both the deploy and the push commands. And there it is. We see that the name credential that was deployed is the one that points to the production Heroku app. Let's do the same, but this time changing the deploy destination environment variable to UAT. And we see that this time the string replacement feature inserted the UAT endpoint. This means you can perform the replacement without having to write your own script, enabling easier CI/CD automation. That's all from me, throwing it back to our amazing host, Mo.
Welcome to the Q&A portion of this session. We are very excited to hear from you. And we are already seeing a great set of questions coming in. Now, if you want to ask us a question, mention @SalesforceDevs account on Twitter or use our hashtag #SalesforceLive. Now, if you're not on Twitter, use Trailblazer community and go to Salesforce Developers group to ask your questions. With that, let's actually go ahead and get started. All right, so my first question is to you, Leo. So we have a question from a LinkedIn community where a developer is sort of curious about what happens, if a developer sort of adds multiple references to that ref tag that you just showed us. Like if I add multiple references tag with the same name, what's the expected behavior?
Sure. Yeah, as you can have like your template and you can use different like conditionals, let's say the if else directives. If you use multiple refs, the last one in the template is the one that supersedes and gets in the ref's value.
Okay, so the last one always wins. Now, along the same line, I have some more questions. So somebody is also curious on, is there going to be a dynamic support there? So that LWC ref attribute, can that take a dynamic value or is it always going to be a static value?
You mean for the template refs?
Yes.
Right now, it's a static value, like the reference is direct.
Direct, and there is no support for dynamic at this point. Just to clarify that.
All right.
Thank you so much, Leo. I think that answers a query for our LinkedIn community. Now, this is a question coming from Twitter for you, Andre. Folks are really excited about Salesforce Functions and support for Python. So thank you so much for actually adding Python support. We have community who actually program in other languages, let's say Ruby on Rails or .NET. So now they're curious, will there be additional support for other programming languages as well?
Great question. So we are always looking at what languages would be most helpful, and we do want your feedback around this. Holler to either your AE or on the Trailblazer community. But one of the nice things in this release is the release of custom build packs, which does let you build in your own support to further extend the platform. So if the platform doesn't have support for Haskell, for example, you do have the tools and the extensibility points for you to add in that additional language and those additional entry points.
Got it. Thank you so much. And my next question is to Alba. Alba, this question is coming from our Trailblazer community and our Trailblazer Ryan. Ryan, thank you so much for this question. Keep the questions coming. So on the DevOps Center, right? The question is around DevOps Center here. Are you providing support for the GitHub Enterprise logins?
Hello, Ryan. Thank you for your question. So I don't think so. I think this is something on the roadmap. I know that some months ago, this was on the roadmap for the after GA time, but I'm not 100% sure. So what we are going to do is that this video is going to be posted in the YouTube channel, in the Salesforce Developers YouTube channel. I'm going to talk with Karen Fidela, who is our product manager for DevOps Center, and she will respond the question with 100% of certainty. But that's what I think at the moment. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Ryan, again. And we have this question already on our Trailblazer community, Alba. So we'll also definitely leave our responses there. Again, thank you. The next question is also to you, Alba. This is coming from Twitter, from Square. I hope I'm pronouncing your name properly. So this is, again, a question around DevOps Center roadmap. So what does the DevOps Center roadmap look like to include, is it going to support additional source repositories? Square is really excited to use it. But the only blocker I think he has at this point is, is not working with GitHub. So will there be additional source repositories apart from GitHub is his question.
Yes, of course. We are actually working on that. And that is something that I know for sure. If you take a look at the release notes, so DevOps Center was made generally available a month ago. And then after that general availability status, we already provided some improvements. In those improvements, you can check, you can see improvements in the way in which you can connect to orgs and in the way in which you define pipelines. You can swap orgs, remove orgs, and so on. And on the roadmap, we have things such as connecting to different version control systems and repositories such as Bitbucket and others. I'm not sure which ones are first in the queue, but I'm 100% sure that the team is working on that. Again, I will ask for more clarification on the comments of the YouTube video.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alba. Our next question is for you, Andrea. First of all, the external services getting so much of love. People are really excited to see that new dashboard that you showed us, and also the MuleSoft integration and the whole limit increase. So one of the questions that our Twitter community has is, are there any plans to enhance, to make edits to that existing external services registrations used in flows?
Cool. Thanks for that question. Yeah, this is actually a popular idea on the ID Exchange. We did a few releases ago launch the capability to make compatible edits to an existing external service registration that is already currently used in Flow, but we do realize that it does have some limitations with that. So we have taken that feedback, and it is something that we are currently evaluating. It is on our roadmap. So it's really exciting to see that it is something that our community is asking for. So stay tuned. I don't have a specific release when we're planning for that, but it is something we are heavily evaluating.
Thank you so much, Andrea. The next question is from Stuart. Stuart, thank you so much. And it is a really important question. And I think, Alba, I'll let you answer, and then I'll add my comments to this. So what does Code Builder general rollout roadmap look like?
So that's something that we are actively working on at the moment. Code Builder is planned to become generally available very soon. You can actually install the beta right now. It is a package that you have in the App Exchange and that you can install in your org to try it out and to play with it. And we're working towards that direction because we think it's a very important initiative. So stay connected, pay attention to TDX News, because you will get some more information about Code Builder very soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Alba. And I'll just add to this that Code Builder is definitely one of the very important products in our product suite of products that we are focusing on. Definitely, you will have more information about this at TDX. There's a lot of exciting content that's going to be put out there at TDX. So make sure to visit the Code Builder booth for more information on that. All right, so moving on. So the next question is for you again, Andre. And this question is around region support. Now, this is very exciting update that you just shared that there are regions that are supported. So there are already certain regions that went GA. Are there any more regions that are going to be supported for functions?
Oh, absolutely. So this is all under the safe harbor provisions, of course, but some of the next set of regions that we want to make available are Singapore, Mumbai, Montreal, Paris, and London. And of course, we're always looking for new regions to include. So these are going to be great to make sure that your applications are very performant, that you're going to meet all of the compliance and security needs of your organization in this very geographically distributed world.
Right. Thank you. And you mentioned Singapore, Mumbai, Montreal, Paris, and London. All these are like one of the best cities, I would say, and one of my favorite cities. So really cannot wait for like functions being supported in those regions. So that's exciting.
Yeah, fantastic places.
Yeah, fantastic places. Now, Andre, so one of the questions I have about these regions is, so what does it mean actually to have a region supported? Does it mean like our servers are going to be there? Latency is going to be reduced when you invoke functions from Salesforce.org? Like, what is the exact need to have these, services or the functions running in these regions?
Yeah, good question. So it allows us to have the data actually stored inside of each of these geographical regions. Each of these countries have various compliance and data residency laws, which may say, hey, your computation or your data needs to be stored locally. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is because the underlying systems that we build upon are physically located in these regions. Thanks to physics and the speed of light, we're able to get these the data to and from you and your customers that much more quickly.
Awesome. I am pretty sure that answers the question there. So there is one question for you, Alba, regarding DevOps Center. So this question is coming from our Trailblazer community, Christopher Wagner. Christopher Wagner, shout out to you for this question. Great questions today. So one of the questions is there any cost to using DevOps Center?
No, there isn't. DevOps Center is free for all our customers. We want our customers to implement the best CI/CD patterns and the best rollout strategy for their features and their metadata. So we want to provide this feature for customers completely free.
Awesome. Yeah, so it's free. And also, I would say that release notes are out, and also there is a setup guide for DevOps Center. If you just go through our developer website, you'll find them, and you set it up. Basically, it's there within your org. You can enable it. It's available right now. Go try it, and let us know your feedback. The next question is for you, Leo, and this is really an interesting question. So this is regarding that new if true and if else directives, right? Community is really excited about this. Leo, thank you for your team for working on this. Now the question is, there is already a legacy version of if and else directives. Is it gonna be end of life soon for them? Is there any phase out plan for them? What do you recommend for our developers?
The new directives are the new recommendation. Of course, now we have legacy directives, but we are not going to phase them out soon to not burn our users, forcing them to move quickly. Of course, we eventually want to deprecate that, but that's going to be in a good pace that allows everyone to move into the new directive.
Awesome. The next question is for you, Alba, and it is a follow-up question on one of your answers. Is thanks for addressing GitHub versus other options like GitLab, and others will help make DevOps Center accessible to many more orgs. So I think it's a general comment. It's not a question. They're really excited. Our community is excited, and this is shout out to Jonathan Green from our Trailblazer community. He's really excited, that there will be support for GitLabs and other repositories as well from the DevOps Center, because I think he and his team uses GitLabs. All right, so Alba, this question is for you. It's also coming from, I think, Trailblazer community. So the question is, from the recently released features of Salesforce CLI, can you highlight one that everyone should use and know?
I can highlight my favorite one, my recent favorite one, which is that now you are able to type commands without having to use columns, just with spaces, like with the other CLIs that I have utilized. And also that you can type commands in any order. Now the CLI is taxonomy free, and you can write SFDX, source, force, push, for instance. And I like that because it gives me more freedom. And for me, it's a much more friendly way of writing commands.
Got it. So it's like SFDX open org or SFDX org open, everything will work now. It's just taxonomy free, right? That's so cool. That's so cool. All right. We have next question, and this is again a question for you, Andrea. So this is a question coming from Trailblazer community again. So for the external services, you know that on the back end, it generates these dynamic Apex classes. Can we edit any of these classes, or these classes are locked?
Yeah, it's a good question. So at the moment, they are locked. We auto-generate those, as you mentioned. But it is something that, we're constantly evaluating as well with our developer community, if that is something that they find to be a little bit more flexible in order for them to be able to make those edits. So please feel free to, send out a note or just add an idea actually on the idea exchange. And that's really the easiest way for us to evaluate how much the developer community would really love that feature.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrea. The next question is for you, Leo, which is around the locker. So Lighting Web Security is here, and this question is coming from Twitter, from Tom Force. Tom Force, shout out to you for this very important question. So is there an end of life for the classic locker or the locker services? Because now that LWS, Lighting Web Security, is going to take over.
No, there is not yet. That's a good question. Until we are able to do the auto enablement for everyone, we are not gonna have it. There is a chance we might see some deprecation coming in, but that if that happens, it will happen like after 2024.
Got it. Awesome. All right. So this question is for Andre. So this is really an interesting question, Andre, around limits. We always have lots of questions around limits. And this is around that bulk API support that you showed us in your demo. Like now there's a bulk API support for Salesforce Functions. So are there going to be any limits to that amount of data that can be added using the bulk API?
Yes, there are. We are still bound by a couple of limits, one of them being the overall limits of the function space and the limitations of the underlying both API. But we have added a number of convenience methods to make it easier to work within these constraints if you do happen to reach the 100 meg limitation of a single both API call. So even though these limits exist, it is now easier to work with them and craft your function in a way that you don't have to worry about them quite as much.
Got it. So this bulk API support that was added, right? Was there any open source project that you would want to credit this to? Because I saw in the community, like JS Force was used for that node specific SDK that we had. Was there a open source project update that you want to share on this?
Yeah, thank you for calling out JS Force. So our team works very closely with a bunch of the open source communities, both as part of Salesforce Functions and a lot of the shared technology that powers both Salesforce Functions and Heroku. So as part of this work, we've made additions and improvements to the open source project JS Force to support V2 of the bulk API. So even if you are not a Salesforce customer and you're still using JS Force, or excuse me, if you're not a Salesforce Functions customer, but you still want to use JS Force, you still have that ability as part of the open source work that we've done.
Awesome. And, Andre, so on this, I saw the Python SDK. Will the Python SDK will also have this bulk API support?
Yes. So originally it was a little bit dicey as far as timing goes, but we were able to bring bulk API support into the Python SDK, at least by the time that it fully releases at spring 23.
Awesome. Thank you so much for those questions. So Andrea, this is a very interesting question that is coming from our Trailblazer community. So you showed us the dashboard where we can monitor the limits for external services. Can we also access through APIs? Like, is there a tooling API or a REST API that our developers can access and get that information?
That's a good question. We actually don't have that available for them to access. But yeah, again, if it's something that, it's something important, it sounds like it is, we could definitely explore the ability to open that up.
Awesome. Thank you again.
Yeah.
So the next question, again, this is for you, Andrea, from Kent Manning. Kent, thank you again for using our Trailblazer community and asking this question. Is external services included or is it like extra charge?
Good question. So it's actually included as part of the platform. So as long as you have the capability API enabled, you basically have access to this feature.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And with those dashboards now you can monitor all of the your consumption, so that's pretty cool. And thank you so much for your team, Andrea, to work on that. All right, so the next question is for you, Alba. So the question here is pretty general, coming from our Trailblazer community again. What are some of the new features? You mentioned that there are some new features that are going to be added to the DevOps Center in spring 23, because I know DevOps Center was GA'd almost last release. So can you tell us like some of the new features that are coming in DevOps Center product?
Yeah, of course. So I already mentioned that it's much easier to connect to environments. For instance, if you are developing in an environment which is a sandbox and that sandbox gets refreshed, it's easy to connect to the refreshed sandbox. Also, it's easier to manage environments in pipelines. So now you can remove environments from a pipeline or swap an environment if the pipeline is not activated yet. There's also a validate only deployment that allows you to test if your deployment is going to work before actually executing it and deploying the actual code. And there's also a validation that when you connect to a development environment, checks if the development environment has source tracking activated, right? Because we want to have source tracking activated so that DevOps Center can find out which metadata changed and which metadata you want to move to the next or in the pipeline.
Awesome. So there is a related question here around that is, would DevOps Center support industries like Omni Studio and other products that we have?
Yeah, so I'm not super familiar with industries, but if industries is metadata, DevOps Center, it's going to end up supporting moving every kind of metadata from one org to another. That's, I think, the final goal, right? To facilitate that task to our customers. So,
so I just wanted to add that, industries product was an acquisition, right? And prior to acquisition, it was all data, as far as I know that. all the OmniScript and OmniStudio and Data Raptor and all these features from our industry cloud. They kind of create objects under the hood. They are data. So there is like translation workbench. That's like there are different tools like IDX to move them from one org to the other org. But I think there is a work in progress. Actually, I think there's a significant amount of work that has already been gone through to convert some of these, objects into actually standard metadata compared to, data. So that work is going on. You can see in the release notes, there's significant amount of information on all the transition that has happened. So definitely some of them have moved to metadata. And I think the goal should be able to use DevOps Center then. Thing to add on. All right. So the next question is again for you, Andre. So this question is around, so you showed us like, how to retrieve binary content from Salesforce with using a new, SDK additions, like for supporting content versions. So a lot of our developers have actually implemented this on their own without using this SDK version that we just brought in this release. Is it going to break those functionality that they're already used to after this new thing that got added?
No, it won't. That would be incredibly rude of us to break existing code, and we do not want to do that. So the changes that we have made in this space are additive. Of course, we still recommend you follow best practice and pin your version of the client libraries. And our default templates for functions do this automatically for you. But to reiterate, we're not going to break your existing code.
That's awesome. Okay. So the next question is for you, Alba, again. It seems like there's lots of questions today on DevOps Center. So one of the, I think DevOps Center is something that everyone is excited about and they're sort of interested in. So DevOps Center is great, but I would like to be able to work with it from my command line, from my CLI. Is that something on the roadmap, Alba?
Well, I'm excited too, and I'm happy to tell you that yes, that's something on the roadmap. That is something that we're working on with high priority, and I hope to start seeing that very soon incorporated into DevOps Center.
Awesome. I will look for some content from Alba on this once these new commands come out. Awesome. So the next question, and this question is for you, Leo. So this question is around Lightning Web Components in general. It is very generic question. So the question here is, what are some of the new stuff that's coming apart from like Spring 23 release? You showed us these new updates. What are some of more things? They are very curious to know what is there in the roadmap for Lightning Web Components the coming year.
Okay, so try not to reveal many of the spoilers that I have. Probably gonna reveal some of them at TDX, but we have some very interesting roadmap that is focused in developer experience. So for when you're using LWC, we have plenty of LWC templates improvements coming in. And we're going to reveal some of them. We have some better interaction with the native custom elements. I can already say that. And we are also focusing on the performance when you're using LWC. So I'm very excited about this. I can reveal the spoilers at TDX, so stay tuned. It's going to be very fun.
Awesome. The next question, I think, is for you, Andre, again. This is like, can I use third-party Python libraries that make REST call out to external services? Like simple things like Google Map APIs and stuff, which are written in Python now in Salesforce Functions.
Oh, absolutely. So one of the big benefits to Salesforce Functions is being able to use the existing ecosystems and package managers and package libraries, where in Python, you're able to use pip and access the Python package index, PyPI, and use all the existing libraries that are out there. And that includes libraries which can make calls out to external services, whether or not that's Google Maps or your own favorite external service.
Awesome. So let's talk about something that I'm personally curious about, this functions thing, cloud native build packs. I think you talked a bit about some of the updates that are happening to Spring 23. So what is a cloud native build pack, Andre, and why would a developer be interested in like having cloud native build pack for functions?
Oh, so I really love this question for a number of reasons. One is that cloud native build packs and build packs in general are a technology which powers not just Salesforce functions, but it has its roots in powering Heroku and powering parts of Salesforce's own internal structure. So cloud native build packs are the underlying technology which turn your code, whether or not it's written in Node or Java or Python or Haskell, if you decide to make your own cloud native build pack in Haskell. They're the technology which turns that code into something which runs on the actual machine. Okay. So one of the nice things about it is that, as a developer, you don't have to think about, oh, how do I get this running on the system? Am I always up to date with the latest version of Java? You don't have to think about that. And it provides an additional extensibility point for you to add additional functionality to the underlying container and image which is running. And that additional functionality may be an entirely new language. It may be another set of dependencies that a library may call on. One of the things that we have seen that is very popular in our early testing with Salesforce Functions and custom cloud native build packs is being able to include Puppeteer and Headless Chromium as part of your Salesforce function. And we've seen this being used a lot when creating PDFs from an HTML site, creating pixel perfect matches of what your users see and a generated asset.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that detailed explanation, Andre. Andrea, this is a question for you. What is in the roadmap for external services? Now, the limits have all increased. What are some of the new things that you're looking to tackle in a couple of releases from here?
Yeah, for sure. So one thing that we're actually evaluating pretty closely is declarative OAS editor, essentially. And the reason for that is really, we have seen, a series of different folks. We get admins, developers, all kinds of people who try to test out our functionality. So there are different skill sets that it kind of required. And so one thing we were trying to bring to light and kind of help with the adoption a bit is like giving them a more declarative editing capability that kind of extrapolates the skill set of needing to know behind the scene what exactly a spec is and how to make those edits. So it's something we're evaluating. We also think that that'll help a bit with validation, like having a validation testing phase, as well as even an enhanced debug log. And again, what we're trying to do is guide the user once they have an API that they're interested in how to successfully make those call outs from Flow or bots, Omni Studio. And then obviously for our developer community, they might not require that as much, but again, it might not be something that we're very well versed in. So we do see that it's a bit of a benefit on both sides of the fence for that on that aspect. The other thing we're looking at is also a bit of an accelerated name credentials functionality to kind of give them a little bit an easier way for users. And the same thing, there's name credentials can be complex in setting it up. And the way that we kind of structure, you have to start, from the ground up as far as here's the authentication that you need, built up on top of that, then you can have your API, your external service. So what we're trying to do is accelerate that name credential capability to make it a little bit easier for the user to build that out. And again, get to that first hello world quicker. So those are, two of the key things that we're evaluating, in addition to what I mentioned earlier, where enhancing the ability to make edits to an existing registration so that a user can make changes to whatever API that they're doing quickly and then see those propagated downstream in the different ways where they've already leveraged those actions. So those are two or three things that we're looking at for the future roadmap.
Awesome. And on that note, right, I have a question around packaging, is this external services kind of packageable? Like, can it be
Yes.
used in like, okay.
Yep, that is something that we've seen heavily used with our ISV partner community.
Okay.
And then so that kind of ties a bit into with the ability to make edits to those existing schemas that they've already leveraged. So if they need to make changes to that, we're trying to figure out a way to make those safe changes to enable them to then propagate that down to the customers. But it is packageable for sure.
Got it. Awesome. Now this question is for you, Leo, and it is coming from Jefferson Chavis on Twitter. Thank you again, Jefferson, for your question. We truly appreciate it. So the question is, are there any plans to improve the developer experience of Lightning Web Components, specifically for the local development?
Yes, there are. Okay. I'll say like my team focus is more directly like towards the general development, but there are considerations under local development as well.
Got it. Yeah, because I know that we had this local development server project, and it's been kind of sitting there for quite a long without a lot of attention to it. So is there any plans to pick that up, or like, is there something else that your team is building?
This is a more like a cross teams enforcement. I cannot reveal anything right now, but yes, we have this under review.
Got it. Awesome. All right. I think we are sort of running out of questions, live questions. But meanwhile, as our community sort of pitches some questions, I have something interesting to talk about with everyone today. Can we go around and talk a little bit about what content or what features you're working for TDX? I know that TDX is coming very fast. It's going to be awesome in-person live event. So we'll start with you, Leo. What is cooking for TDX in your world?
I cannot reveal all the spoilers. As I mentioned, I would love to reveal them right now. But I can tell like there's a lot of things that we've been observing, especially from the Trailblazer community, also ID Exchange. And we are trying to capture some areas like people have been talking about like things they had in Aura and they want in LWC. So we are bringing some of these good experiences to LWC. So you can expect like templates to be more expressive in the future. You can expect some good things coming in for the developer experiences, also matching like good experiences you had from Aura.
Awesome. And I want to remind something here, Leo. There is a wonderful blog post that got published on our developer website. So go to developer.salesforce.com/blogs. And there is a neat little blog around how we are thinking about migrating both our internal components and also some of the external base components that we provide you to LWC for different things like utility bar and workspace API and all those great stuff. So there is a survey link there. I would definitely encourage you to go to that survey link and fill out like what do you find it difficult to migrate when you are sort of thinking about migration from Aura to LWC. So let me ask you something, Leo, before we kind of move to Andre about what is cooking in his world for TDX. Why would somebody would want to move away from their Aura components to LWC components? Like, is there any advantage to migration to LWC?
Yes, we have a lot of good investments on LWC. Also, like we are very close to modern web standards, so we are leveraging everything that we have coming as native in the browser. So you take the experience from using what is native in web components as well. We have some good integrations coming in on LWC. You can talk to me directly on TDX. I'm going to be at the LWC booth, by the way. But we're going to present some things related to bringing native custom elements, so you can bring all the frameworks that you already might have like from different UI libraries, and you want to bring into the Lightning platform. This is very interesting. I'm going to have examples there, and there's Yes. So the experiences are actually going to be pretty much interesting and always moving towards leveraging modern web standards. This is the best way that you get like the best performance from your web browsers.
Right. Performance, like performance is
Yes.
the key word here.
Yes.
So you're saying you'll show something bringing React or Vue or something like that within LWC? That's what.
This is actually becoming reality. Yes, I'm going to have some examples there.
Okay, examples. Awesome. Awesome. Really looking forward to that. Now let's move on to Andre. Andre, what's cooking in the functions world? What are you excited about at TDX?
As a couple of things. For me, I am centering a lot of my time around Python for functions. So by the time TDX rolls around, Python will have gone GA. It's in beta now that anybody can go and start working with it and experimenting with it. But by TDX, it'll be in GA. We'll have customers starting to use this in production environments. So I'm really excited to both share and showcase some of what we've done and what other folks in the external community have done in this space.
Awesome. Awesome. Really looking forward to that. I know Python is like, I would say, one of my favorite languages apart from JavaScript. I would definitely pick JavaScript, but just because I come from Salesforce world, right? I love JavaScript, but I also have a close relationship with Python. So I'm really excited to see that support, and functions is going to enable all our Python developers. Now, before I move to Andrea, a real quick thing here. I've heard a lot of feedback around when is the packaging support for functions coming from our ISV community. Do you have any insights into that, Andrea?
So we have that on our broader roadmap. You can see the functions roadmap on the GitHub Heroku and Functions site.
Got it.
But we don't have a specific date that we are able to share at the moment. So TBD, but I want everybody and all of our ISVs to know we hear you. It's top of our minds. We want to make it right for everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Now to you, Andrea. What are you excited about at TDX?
Yeah, for sure. So historically, external services has really been focused a lot on, I've mentioned before, is kind of the declarative way, the low-code way to access these external services. One of the things that we launched previously, and we're really excited to really showcase that at TDX, is the ability to invoke external services natively from Apex and really showcase kind of guiding the user, taking them through the entire cycle of that and drilling into the capabilities that offers. It is something that we're pretty excited, and it's been in the books for a long time. So it's really something we want to highlight at TDX.
Awesome. Actually, there is a question now coming from the community for you, Andrea. So we'll take that before I move over to Alba for what's cooking in her world. So this is around API versions, right? So is API versioning going to be available for external services? I think you answered that, but let's hear again.
So the ability basically to call through one of the, sorry, what do you mean by API versioning?
I think what they mean is like ability to make changes to the open API spec.
Schema.
Yeah, schema,
Gotcha.
And being able to version that.
Gotcha. That's actually a good question. We have heard in different ways the concept of that versioning, and I think it also becomes pretty important when you highlighted a little bit before with like our muleys and creating those APIs and kind of going through the pipeline. So the short answer is yes, it is something we are potentially evaluating. We obviously have to be very conscious about how that versioning gets propagated downstream in the different ways that it's leveraged. So I mentioned Apex, Omni Studio, Flow. So we have to be very cognizant of those implications. But again, It is something that we've heard, and it's really exciting so that we can actually close the full loop there when someone wants to make those changes and then see those reflected in the different parts of where they leverage those operations or those actions. So that's kind of my long answer, but the short one is yes, it is something we are evaluating.
Got it. So Andy Has, thank you for the question. Actually, this question was from Andy Has. So Andy says they were using MuleSoft and are doing active development with these endpoints. So right now they will have to create a new external service with the new API version and then go into the VS Code, edit the metadata change. so that they can use the external services variables, so that they can get or change those service variables. Brilliant workaround, Andy, I would say. But as Andrea said, they are working on making this really easy for our developer community. Thank you again, Andrea. Over to you, Alba. What's cooking? I know you're working a lot for TDX. So what's coming, Alba?
Yeah, so very quickly, I'm very excited about two things. First thing is the Trailblazer Theater. It's going to be the first time that we have Trailblazers giving talks at TDX, and I'm running that together with Christy Fidura, my colleague, and it's going to be amazing. It's a technical theater, and people are going to explain a challenge and the technical solution that they apply to solve that challenge. So it's going to be really interesting. And the second thing is that I'm going to give a talk about the Apex SDK for Slack.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and how the next generation Slack platform is going to influence the Apex SDK roadmap.
Wow, that's exciting. That's really exciting. Alba, really looking forward to that. I'll give my update. I am actually working on a couple of sessions. One will be Apex best practices. We've heard this from last TDX, how important this session is. So I'm really working on that, and also LWC best practices. So really, if you're an Apex and LWC developers, I humbly request you to check out my session actually. I think we are almost coming to the time. Let me see if there are any more questions. So there are a couple of interesting questions that came through my Twitter feed, and I'm gonna try and answer. And I think it was directed towards me itself. So there was a question from Phil. Phil said he was unable to join the release readiness live from the start and missed all the presentation. He's just catching up the Q&A. Phil, don't worry. Yes, the recordings will be available for you. We'll also put it on our YouTube channel. Thanks and shout out to Sarah, my colleague here. She'll make sure that we will definitely have access to this content for you, so that you can view at your convenience. There's also a question from Puneet Gaur. He's saying, I would like to learn more on Salesforce Functions as I haven't used it. Could you please share some resources to learn this in Salesforce? Puneet, if you'd have catch this recording, you will find there are resources from Julian. Julian, our developer advocate, and my colleague actually has put together a sample app called Functions Recipes. Check it out. It's on the Trailhead sample apps gallery, or you can go to Trailhead apps repository and just look for Functions Recipes. Or even if you just Google Salesforce Functions Recipes, you'll find like bite-sized recipes for you. It's a GitHub project, and it'll teach you everything about Salesforce Functions. And one of the common thing that we hear about Salesforce Functions is I don't have access to the org to try it out. I would say you need access to the org only for production purposes. There's a local development baked into this whole experience. And so, there's nothing stopping you from using it. There's also a neat little blog post on how to use functions for development with your local development workflow setup from Julian. So I would request to check it out. And with that, I think we are almost time, and I would like to wind it up. I have a slide to share, so let me share that slide. All right, so this is our Learn More campaign. So if you want to learn all about Spring 23 and all the enhancements that we have published a lot of blog content, both for developers and administrators. Make sure you check it out. This is the URL sforce.co/learn more. So make sure to check out that URL and make sure to complete it by March 31st. And if you do it, you'll be entered into a raffle, and you have a chance to win a Salesforce certification voucher. That seems really exciting. So make sure to complete all these Learn More blog posts and all the content there, and review all the content. And note that we'll not stop. Keep your questions coming through Twitter or Trailblazer community. We'll get to that offline too, and we'll answer all of the questions. Now, with that, I would want to say thank you again, everyone. And thank you to our experts actually for joining this live session. And I hope all of you Have a very good day. Thank you and have a good rest of your day.